welcome. Today we are talking about Liz Kelly's 8-second PR. Something we don't talk about enough. There is a relationship between marketing and PR. Some people will call them a lot of the same thing. I love the quote from the beginning of the book that says, "Everything you do or say is public relations." I've always said every problem a company ever has is a marketing problem because, it's obviously you just haven't convinced somebody of whatever idea it is that you need to convince them of. It's just funny because if you are holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we're a marketing company. Everything to us looks like marketing. To Liz, of course, everything in the world is a PR problem, but she's got a point,
So there are some people that will tell you that any PR is good PR.
Mm-hmm.
Can you address that?
That was Jane Mansfield, right?
I believe.
There are politicians who will remain unnamed that use that to their advantage. Being famous is worth something, whatever you're famous for. If people have heard of your name, you have an advantage over somebody that nobody has heard of. So there is that, but I think in our industry in particular, that doesn't work because it is such a trust-oriented profession. And, you guys may have a different opinion, but I really think good PR is good PR and not good PR is not worth pursuing.
Yeah, I know, but you need to define where do you draw the line at not versus good? I mean, some of it's obvious, but
yeah, right. And I do think it's fine to be controversial. It's fine to be, it used to be that people would be so conservative in this industry in particular. Nobody would talk about politics or gender or religion or culture or anything else. And now there's an LGBTQ pilot association. There are all kinds of things that are, controversial in one way or another. And you're not going to make everybody happy all the time. And I think that's totally fine. It's fine to have principles that are maybe not shared by the whole rest of the world and to expound on those principles. But really screwing up is really screwing up, and you don't want to be famous for really screwing up, right? I mean, you can be controversial, but you can't be a screw up. How's that for a definition?
Well, I suppose it'll do until a real one comes along.
I'm just making this up, but I do think, really, it is fine to disagree. It is not fine to be incompetent.
Yeah, well, no joke.
Yeah.
And if you know if you don't know you're incompetent, that's even worse.
Right. That's true. Great. Well, do we just want to kind of go around the room and do introductions, and then we'll kind of get into, I kind of already started with, some of my favorite points about the book. I'm Paula Williams. We help aviation companies sell more of their products and services.
And well, in order of preference, I guess Ben came in next. I came in last, but I work for her. This is her company. I do back office stuff.
Way back office stuff. You're in the garage with the Harley, right?
Well, that too.
By choice. He's not in
but
trouble.
That's my choice because I couldn't get the bike into the office, for winter time. So I brought the office to the bike.
There you go.
And I'm Ben Neivert with DBT Aero, one of the clients of ABCI.
I am Stella, and I work with Paula.
And Stella is an amazing copywriter that also has her own company and does travel writing and essential oils and other things that she has an interest in. So, all right. So one thing that occurred to me while reading the book, and we actually just did a workshop 2 weeks ago on basically working with the press. And we talked about how to make friends with reporters. We talked about how to develop a story, how to set up press releases on a regular basis, and so on. And all of that, I think, was great and, hasn't changed all that much. An interesting thing about the book is I think it was written before AI, because I think a lot of the things that Liz talks about are made easier using some AI tools. So, that's one of the things that I would like to get into some of the details of later in this conversation. But
hi, everyone. I am Angel, and
you were thrown in at the last minute to this.
yeah, I just saw the email.
Excellent. Well, we're very happy that you're here. Angel is
So,
my assistant, and she's brand new to ABCI, and we're really, really happy that she's helping us get organized and get the world straightened out and put all things in order.
I thought it was interesting. It just I have done a fair amount of work in technology security.
Mhm.
Not a great, I'm not a deep dark expert, but I have some familiarity with it. And when you read the 8-second PR, it looks like the instructions you give when you're teaching people how to fish. It's the same group of skills
There you
that
go.
you use for a phishing email. I'm like, oh, okay, I already understand these concepts. Exactly how you get people to click on links they shouldn't, or, we've done presentations and training, and it's kind of lists the things that scammers do. And I was like, oh, wait, I've seen this list before. Because of course the motivations and the tools are the same. It's just the outcomes in one case are nefarious.
Mhm. So we could retitle this as how to build clickbait or how to fish with a PH.
Yeah. Well, that's true. You could how to fish.
Right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, except for one part, the part about building credibility. A fish email is more impersonation, which is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to convince you they are somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
not that they themselves are credible.
Right.
They're trying to convince you that they're the bank or the power company, or they're trying to convince you that they're an internal employee or a supplier.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to build their own credibility. They're looking to convince you that they actually are somebody else. But it's similar.
Yeah.
And the other points are of course, they try and use current events. Every time there's a big event in the world, there's a million. Now they don't do it as much as they used to because the AI used to protect companies fixed that out really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Never
So,
let the crisis go to waste, right?
yeah, the minute a crisis occurs, the AI that scans the inbound emails immediately looks for those,
Mm-hmm.
because it's looking at the press as it's building its heuristics to protect the company.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it blocks, legitimate email, but it at least tries to keep out all the Prince scams and the Israeli war scams and
Right.
send money.
Mhm.
Hurricanes are a big one. There's just so many emails that get created regarding giving money to hurricanes.
Mhm.
And a lot of the good security systems just block them. That was my comment. It does look vaguely familiar. I was reading it going, wait a minute. I read this list before.
Right.
Yeah,
John, it's a hobby of yours as well.
our email scanner works a little differently. It uses Bayesian math, and it goes in and does all the heuristics as you talk about, but then it will actually put it into a sandbox and execute whatever's there and tell you if it's good or bad. Well, it won't deliver it if it's bad. And then you can look at the report and see what you want to do. But again, you're right, because out of 5,000 emails, they say that they will get one or two you shouldn't get will come through, and one or two you should get won't come through. Well, 1,000 emails, that's damn good.
Yeah, and they use pretty much the 5 or 6 or 7 key elements of the book to try and get you to read the thing. It is tricky. When I was working in public safety and we did some press work, and I worked with state and federal legislators, what you put in the subject line really matters.
Yes.
Absolutely.
If I could get a subject line so they didn't have to open the email, that was a huge success.
Yes. I look for those.
Yeah, I do that with Michael. I do that with a lot of people. Try and send emails that weekly status reports to the governor would have one line that just told him whether he had to open the email or not.
Yeah. All of
we're on track.
Can be used for good or evil, right?
Yeah.
Building great subject lines is a superpower, and it can be used by heroes and villains. But it is a great skill to have. And I think, they do a nice job in the book of outlining how to improve, your subject lines, which is great.
And a lot of people don't understand is even if you suspect the email, the easy way is to look at where it came from.
Mhm.
The email came from, because it's going to look a lot like where you expect it to come from, but there's only needs to be one letter different.
Yeah.
And a surly O instead of a zero will do it. You have to be aware.
Mhm.
Just because you're the final, doesn't matter about all the AI and all the Bayesian math and all that stuff. You are the last link, and you have to be knowledgeable to know whether it's good or bad
Right.
and how to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, the book is about marketing, and I think my work with the press, which isn't all that frequently, but I was the media relations for Ernst & Young Asia Pacific. So, I mean, we had a media relations people, but they had questions about the internet and technology and branding. They all came to me.
Mhm.
And we got a couple of pretty decent interviews because we crafted some pretty decent. I mean, I ended up doing one of the top financial newspapers in London, which semi pissed off the London office because they had tried several times and couldn't get the journalist interested.
Was it
But we crafted a pretty good email and got the person was in New Zealand and I went to New Zealand for another reason. They ended up getting a really good interview from their stringer
Mhm.
and it ran in London. And they just changed the information to our London office. And they were pleased, but they were annoyed that. So I sent them a copy. So we sent them a copy of the email we sent.
Right.
And they liked, I think they reused it, but it crafted a real targeted message towards why you would make a bunch of money doing what we were doing.
Right.
It didn't talk about the technology very much.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Stella, can you bring us back to PR?
The book. Well, that was PR. That's what I mean. It was
exactly. Ben brought
it
us.
was 8 seconds. Yeah, it was 8 seconds. I didn't follow all the rules because I didn't know what they were, but it had a powerful hook. We told them that this was about customer satisfaction, which led to all this brand equity, and that led to value down the line. And that was the target. That's why a financial paper would even talk to me. But I think we missed a few things. I mean, Ernst & Young was handy because you're credible.
Mhm.
It's, 10 years ago, you could throw Boeing on something and people would listen.
Yeah. When you're working for a 100-year-old company and, working for Wells Fargo, this was such a nice halo effect. When you're working for a 100-year-old company, it doesn't matter what you say. They're going to open your email if, you're the Financial Times and you're Wells Fargo. But the rest of us have to work at it.
I will ask you a
we
question.
can use, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I had a friend in Texas and his friend worked for Enron.
Yeah.
And she once said to him, he was relaying the story.
Yeah.
She once said to him, she was applying for jobs after Enron's collapse. And she said she got a huge number of interviews because she had worked at Enron.
Mhm.
But nobody was going to hire her. They just wanted to get the inside scoop. So I'm not sure how the branding played in her favor. She
Mhm.
couldn't get a job, but she always got an interview. And the other one is a wonderful person that I worked with, or still do, now a very good friend of mine who's she's the chancellor of the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs now. So, but she graduated from Wharton, and Wharton graduates always get interviews.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have Wharton on your resume, if you're a Wharton Business School graduate, you get interviews.
That is branding. That's brand equity, right?
So how do those two work?
Brand equity
Enron and
yeah.
Enron versus Wharton.
Well, there you go. Is all PR good? Enron would be a great example of how that is not the case. I mean, they have had to rebrand and do all kinds of crazy things because of some of the things that happened. Wharton, luckily, at least so far, knock on something, doesn't have any scandals that I know of, connected to its name. And so, they're really, really careful with their brand equity and for good reasons.
So let me pose a question.
Okay.
Now, I didn't go to Wharton. I did go to business school. And one of the things we had was they had the local news anchor come out and teach a class on PR. And he said, if you ever are called for an interview by anybody that you don't know, put them off and get the corporate PR guy to do it, because otherwise they will eat you alive. And they'll make it look like whatever they are predisposed to wanting to make it look like.
Mm-hmm.
And he proceeded to prove it with each member of the class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make anybody look silly if he's good, right? And it's his intention.
Is that still the way it works, or is it worse or better?
The thing.
Well, if you look at the interview that Kamala Harris just did with Fox News,
Mhm.
the guy tried his darndest
Mhm.
to make her look bad. And there were 3 or 4 occasions that she was able to turn the wheel and go right back at him and, say, I happen to know that, you edited that out, or that, that's not true, and she was able to call him on those points. So, some of it is just being prepared and having your ducks in a row as well. When you're doing an interview, you have to know, the other person, you have to know the topic that you're talking about, and be able to present yourself in such a way that communicates what it is you want to say.
So it's like great writing, only faster, and thinking on your feet and being able to respond and have those facts right at your disposal.
So does the majority, or is the majority of business-oriented folks, aviation or not, predisposed to be able to do what you just said?
No.
Usually, like at Cessna, Cessna never I was an engineer. We were never allowed to talk to the press. Absolutely not. That never happened. Even if they needed it, the chief engineer would stand behind one of the executives and say nothing.
That's right.
We, but when I was at Ernst & Young, they were very careful. If you got reached out, if someone came to you directly, you were meant to bounce it back to them, and you did, because that was practically a fireable offense.
Yeah.
You would bounce it back to the PR people. They would vet the person quite carefully. They did a pretty, and some people they knew, they're like, oh yeah, you should talk to her. She's fabulous. You should do that. And you just get it. And then they would send you a packet. And it would, back then it was actually paper, which for me was a pest, because the paper had links printed, so you'd have to type the link. It's like, couldn't you just put this in an email? So I didn't have to. But anyway, they would give you this intelligence pack, and it had links to previous work, any other work they've done with Ernst & Young, articles we liked, articles we didn't like. And then you were meant to go through all that material before the interview. And if you didn't, you would get yanked from the list pretty quick.
Yeah, you're expected to be prepared if you're on that list. So
you could make a mess.
I think self-defense is in PR is a skill that is missing, and very, very much needed, because the media is not inclined to think of, especially private aviation, as the hero of the story. They're inclined to think of private aviation as the villain of almost every story. So I think we need to get better at telling our stories. We need to get better at flipping the script. We need to get better we need to become the Kamala Harris of the industry. We need to be able to think like a prosecutor and, be able to tackle those stories and not just ignore when the press gets it wrong. So, that's part of the reason that I'm really, really passionate about this book and making sure that all of our clients feel good about talking to the press, because we need to be transparent, but we need to do it on our terms. And we haven't been. We've been playing defense for the past 25 years in our industry. We used to be the heroes of the world, and now we're the villains. So that needs to
Is it
right.
Yeah, it's a team thing. I just, Ernst and Young, when I was doing the public safety work, I spent 3 years working on training public safety. And one of the meetings I was presenting at to a council, city council,
Mhm.
which is public. So there was a public audience. The news crews showed up
Yeah.
and cameras and all that. And I'm like, uh-oh. So it was myself, the chief of police for that particular town, the mayor, and another captain from another police force, a fire department, couple of fire department captains. So it was a group of us. And at the end, they wanted to talk to us. And, the police chief leaned over. He used to be the commander of Bronx South in New York,
Mm.
which is, if it was its own police department, would be the second biggest police department in the world besides New York,
Mhm.
which it's part of. New York is the largest police department in the world. So he was a chief there in the end, deputy chief. But he leaned over and he said, "We're in this together. Pause before you answer, and one of us might choose to answer instead. We're all going to pause, and we're going to see who's best to answer the question. But don't wait too long, not dead silence, a couple of seconds to see." And I answered one question,
Mhm.
and he answered several. He was really good.
Mm.
And then the city mayor said a couple of things, and then the fire department got to say their piece. So it was a really interesting process of ad hoc teaming up. I mean, we'd been working together for almost a year at that time, so we
Mhm.
knew each other and we could trust each other. But it was a great piece of advice, because I think if he hadn't said pause first, I might not have.
Yeah.
But yeah, it worked out really well. They used a lot of his footage and almost none of mine, which was really good for me.
Yeah, but
Right.
I have been there and done that. I
I
understand.
mean, he's in full uniform, he's tall, he's handsome, he's the epitome of a police chief,
Mhm.
and and of course New York. So he just came off like gangbusters. And the fire department guys, they always like, because, well, they're firemen.
All right.
Mhm.
Everybody loves a fireman.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that they used, turns out, was also a model. I
Wow.
didn't know that. He was in magazines for ads.
Mhm.
Whenever they needed like a firefighter for an ad, he got paid to show up.
Right.
So the news guys loved him too,
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, there's kind of a dichotomy right now with that. You do want to look good. You do want to dress up. You do want to have your best story ready to go. You want to have all of those things, but you also want to be transparent, and you also want to be scrupulously truthful, uh, you know, warts and all kind of truthful. We
Yeah.
screwed up this way and this is what we're doing to fix it. So I think that's a change. I think in the last 5 years is we're moving a little bit backward from the glossy, perfect exterior because nobody believes that anymore. We want to be ourselves. We don't have to be glamorous to be the spokesperson for a company. We just have to be well spoken and polished, but not, what is the word? Plastic? Not too well groomed. I guess that
Yeah.
makes people suspicious. Right.
One of the things that I did learn was you got to be careful of word choices, because they can excerpt things.
Mm.
Saying the wrong combination of things together, even though it's taken out of context, can end up being really bad.
There's a political operative that has worked for both parties. His name is Frank Luntz, and he is a word.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yeah.
Say again? He's what?
Frank Luntz, and his job is to make up words for things like pro-life and anti or war on drugs, and phrases that are very, very effective because they boil a concept down to a single word and get people on the right side of that concept, all with one word. And so I think he's a really great person to read because that's a superpower for good or ill, depending on whether he's working for you or working for the other guy. But yeah, he's a great guy who can boil down storytelling to one word in a really amazing sort of a way. If we had a Frank lens in aviation, I think we'd do really well. Meanwhile, the rest of us just have to do the best we can.
Yeah, there's been some great stories in aviation of people that have said the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was flying a lot, one of the American Airlines captains that I didn't fly American a lot, but in this case, I heard from friends of mine at American that one of their captains decided to make an announcement because there was a delay at the gate. So he said that the machine that ripped the handles off of luggage was broken and they were having to do it by hand. And passengers were really upset. You know, they ended up dismissing him over that.
Yeah.
He ended up dismissed because he said the machine that rips the handles off your luggage is broken, so there's a delay while they do it by hand. People didn't think it was funny.
The humor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's something that we need to be careful with, I think, especially if we're going into international markets and things like that. We've started working with, companies in Asia, which we love. I mean, and they have a great sense of humor, but it's different than our sense of humor. So sometimes we have to explain our jokes. And luckily they give us the grace to do that. We haven't really put our foot in it yet with any of those folks, but humor is different in different cultures and different situations. So as much as we would love to just, try to be funny all the time, we have to be kind of careful with all of that.
Yeah, the Ernst & Young woman had a baby food bottle when she would say, if you're interviewing, like I was in New Zealand and you'd interview, I'd go up into Singapore. I had kind of Asia Pacific. And she was pretty clear. You had to be really careful of context. So she had this baby food jar and there's a picture of a baby on it. It's baby food. And she said, so what's wrong with this? And I'm thinking nothing. And she's like, yes, well, in Africa, the picture is what's in the jar.
Yeah, because of the literacy issues in different languages there. So,
right. And I was like, yeah, it didn't sell well. No.
Assumption and strained carrots. This is not food for your baby. This is, that's awful.
Yeah, that was awful. But her point was we were working with some pretty big companies and some of them were very connected politically. You do the wrong thing and you think it's funny or you think it's a normal context and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the book was interesting of the 8 seconds. I wonder if it's shorter now. When you look at these videos on LinkedIn,
it's an inch thick and they're talking about 8-second PR. So, yeah.
When you look at LinkedIn, they're very short.
Yeah. That's true. And her point that, you do need to capture attention quickly and earn every second, from that point forward is very well taken.
Right.
But I also think that you can earn someone's attention and go as long as you need to. I know we talked in the workshop about the Yellowstone or, what is the other mini series that we've been watching? Where they end with a cliffhanger every time and they earn the next 45 minutes of your time by leaving you on the edge of your seat going, what's going to happen next? And, you get emotionally attached to the characters and you move on in the story. And that's what she's talking about. Yeah.
8 seconds follows along with some of the sales courses I've been to where they tell you got 5 to 7 seconds to earn the next 7 seconds.
Right.
Until you get far enough along where you can earn a minute.
Yeah. So
she's pretty close by the 8 seconds, assuming it applies to PR as well as to sales.
Exactly.
Well, if you look at Super Bowl commercials, a lot of people tune into the Super Bowl just to watch the commercials, and some of those are extremely short, 15-second commercials, and others are, 2 or 3 minutes long, and if you don't grab their attention with something catchy in that first few seconds, they're not going to watch. They're not going to rate your commercial as good or whatever, regardless of what your story was or what point you were trying to get across. So,
exactly.
And what's interesting about that is nobody gives a crap what they're selling.
Very true.
Yeah, Warren's free commercials that don't sell any products.
It's like, who cares about Doritos? It's just another Doritos, but they've got to have a commercial on there for Doritos.
Mm-hmm.
You know, name recognition. I think that the challenge that they're trying to get at is if they, marketers will say, if you hit them 3 or 4 times,
Mm-hmm.
you're likely they'll remember you in the store. I know that when I worked, for the governor's office, they talk about name recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you're running a campaign, and there were a couple of campaigns where the person had a lot of name recognition and they won.
Yeah.
And you think, well, what do people really know about them? Well, and they gave, some presidential candidates won on name recognition, not on substance.
Yeah. I've heard of this guy. Context didn't matter as much as the fact that they've heard of this guy. Or
you're looking at a list of names and you think, oh, I've heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't even remember.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they used to post, one of the policemen I was talking to said, it's a little scary sometimes when you run across someone in the street and you got to remember whether they were on the wanted list or the, oh, that's right, they presented to the chief. That's how I know. You got to keep it straight. Who the good guy, if someone is out with a bolo, you got to remember those names separately from, because some of these guys knew me and I'm thinking, so one day, it's like, yeah, one day if someone confuses it, there'll be that moment where they have to remember which list you're on.
Yeah. And I think if you're in law enforcement, you kind of have a real defined list of good guys.
Yeah, you do.
That's the way you think, because that's your function in society. But I think the rest of us have kind of a pretty gray area in between where there are people that we have heard of that we don't agree with everything that they say, but we know who they are. And celebrities and other people, politicians and so on, fall into that category. And I think we can take advantage of that as long as we don't go too far off on that. If we call one side white, one side black, one side gray, or, the middle part is gray. As long as we don't go way off the deep end into something negative, I think that can work in our favor, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that was interesting. Did you see the article today about Spirit Airlines?
What happened? I haven't read the news.
Well, not what happened. The guy wrote them up. It's in Medium. I love that because it's all authors. And he was talking about the impact Spirit has on the airline industry, even though most people have never heard of them or flown on them. Because they're the ultra low, they're one of only 2 ultra low cost carriers. So low cost like Southwest, they're below. They're ultra low cost.
Right.
And their brand is all about this ultra low cost. And they keep, in markets they enter, prices drop by nearly 50%.
Yeah. So
when they go, because they're running close to bankruptcy and there's rumor they will file, the prices are expected to rise.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting, but their branding is very strong.
Yeah.
They were around for a really long time and no one ever heard of them until this one CEO showed up and figured out how to brand them as an ultra low cost carrier. And suddenly everybody knew who they were.
Right.
They don't get a lot of time.
Yeah. There was a book that we read, what was it, a couple of years back, Shashank Nigham. He actually was the author. He showed up and he was talking about airline branding and talking about Ryanair, which is a perfect example of negative but positive branding. They literally will say, we charge you, or they started a rumor that says we charge people to use the bathroom, which is not true, but it was intended to be funny. And it positioned them as the super low cost carrier. So it's negative publicity, but it worked for them in a positive way. And
supposedly they originated ULCC. They were the original ultra low cost carrier. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they made it work because I've flown with Ryan 3 or 4 times when I was living in Europe, and you really, service-wise and equipment-wise, couldn't tell them from Delta.
Yeah, so you're actually pleasantly surprised when you take a Ryanair flight, and it's not terrible.
Exactly.
So I flew Spirit. They lived up to their reputation.
Yeah, exactly. And they knew they could get away with it because there are a lot of people who would do without a lot of the amenities to save $10, $20, $30 on their fare. So they knew they had a good market position and they had the leeway to take that risk, and it worked for them. So that's great.
And it wasn't 10 or 20, it was 300 or 400.
Was it?
Yeah, oh yeah. Like the price difference between Spirit and United was $300 each way. So close to $600. And I had three, you buy 3 tickets. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Having said that, it took forever to get home. They were like 3 hours late out of the gate coming back because the airplane was late because they're so tight. And then they had a mechanical, they had to fit, and they don't have spare planes. And, it just balloons out of proportion. And the gates, they only had 2 gates. So now the problem is they have multiple flights that are all piled into the same gate, waiting, and you don't know which, the plane would pull in, and even the gate people didn't know which plane it was.
Yeah.
So they have to wait till the crew comes out to find out where they're going next, so they knew who to board.
Wow. Oh, okay.
So yeah.
It does have a bigger negative impact than just no peanuts, but that's
right.
No snacks.
But it was cheap.
Yeah.
And we thought we'd try it because the other problem we had is where we were going, there were no nonstops, which is how we picked them. I couldn't get a nonstop, so it was going to take me all day, or I could go nonstop on Spirit and pay a lot less. So I thought, oh, well, we do that.
Yeah, let's try this. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap up and take a real quick break before our next meeting and things, and just kind of go around the room. I guess if you want to give it a 1 to 10, is it highly recommended, not highly recommended? What's your impression? What do you think?
Do I have to go first?
You can if you'd like.
I give it an 8 or 9.
8 or a 9?
Yeah, I mean it's powerful. It's you need an 8-second, and I try and think about how do you brand a company in 8 seconds. The old elevator speech thing. You need some way to say, here's how I earn that next minute. But it doesn't, obviously written long ago, it doesn't give you the key action items for the current age.
Right.
So that's it, but it's still good information. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
okay.
so some of it is timeless, and 8.5 or 9 probably.
Cool. What would you add to it if you could? I guess that's a question.
I was going to add to it, it'd be the modern stuff like using AI.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
How marketing has changed, with AI in the last, essentially the last 2 years. It is pretty new. So, an updated version of the book with modern technology, modern tools that are used in PR and marketing.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So 1 through 10, Stella?
I'd say a 7 just because it needs to be updated.
Okay, there you go.
It's got the basic information there, that the classic stuff that never changes.
Yeah.
But, a lot of things have changed in the last, 5-7 years just with technology and digital everything. A lot of PR is not done in person or with paper anymore. And so, it's done email, digital websites, whatnot. And so I think that needs to be brought into it.
Agreed. And press kits, digital press kits, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Angel, I know you haven't had time to read the whole book, having just started with this a couple days ago. So I don't know if you have any impressions or if you have anything you'd like to share.
Actually, I just read a few pages and I haven't really get the information really at the book, but I am willing to read the book once I have a time now.
Right? Okay. So you're inspired to read it. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. I think a book like this should be required reading for anybody who is in any kind of a sales or marketing position in an aviation company because of the reasons that we talked about. I think it was in 2008 when all of the automakers went in private jets to Washington, D.C. and ruined the reputation of private aviation for the next 20 years. Well, I'm exaggerating, but still, we've been playing defense ever since that. And we need to get better at playing defense. And, this is a really good start for how to get there, right? So I'd give it a 9 for that. But I wish it were better. As Stella said, I really wish that it had more techniques that are doable, because if you followed everything in this book, it would take you more time than any executive has to become proficient in PR. And I think you can do it with less time using modern tools. So that's the only thing that I would change about it. So I'd give it a 9. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you, taking the time the day before everybody pretty much leaves for NBAA. I know, we're all super busy, but I do think that this is a really important topic, and I'm really happy we had the conversation.